Hey, we're Matt and Julie Beamer with Jonathan and Elizabeth Beamer, and we are celebrating 30 years of living and ministering overseas. And to do that, we're going to be sharing stories both today, Club 1040 Day, and throughout the year coming. We'll be dropping different stories, different podcasts, and things like that to show you how your investment in Club 1040 is making an impact throughout the Middle East and North Africa, and to talk about how by the year 2030, we want to see that impact expand and continue in a strong and more quick way. So make sure you don't miss out, and also help us out by sharing these with your friends as well. Spread the word, because the more we get this word out, the more we can do, the more quickly we can do it together. God bless.
And so lots of things started happening that kind of started inching towards that, which kind of brings me to when you told us that we were going to move. Jonathan, how was that for you?
All I remember was showing up from school one day, being sat on the couch, and they said, hey, I think it was like, we're moving in like 2 months.
Yeah.
We're moving to Nigeria.
We're moving to Nigeria in 3 months or something.
But we had
But do you
already
remember what
taken
you
a
did?
class.
Oh, I was excited.
Excited, man. You fell on the floor and laughed.
That's
right.
Like belly laughed. You're
Yeah,
like,
you did.
"This is
I do
awesome."
remember that.
Yeah. And
Well,
then
I had the
when
exact opposite
we
reaction.
told her, she starts crying.
Well, actually, my mom, she was not supposed to tell me.
Yeah.
They were supposed to wait a little bit longer. I remember that. And you were
forget.
like, actually, hey, Elizabeth, you want to know a secret?
But I think the reason why I was excited was because one of my best friends was Nigerian, and I was over at his house
Yeah, it's
all
true.
the time. So
Our best friends growing up were always different. Mine was Filipino.
Yeah.
Yours was Nigerian. Yeah.
And so they had really brought me into their English Nigerian culture,
Yeah.
quite often. I mean, pretty much every weekend. So that's who I spent a lot of time with. So I thought it was great.
Yeah.
We had already taken a trip there, though.
Yeah.
And so we had already introduced you and kind of gotten,
With-
so you
with
knew.
us?
Yes, with
Yeah.
you. And you took the film camera, and you
Okay, yeah.
were in charge of the camera. In fact, you guys went off on your own. Do you remember that whenever you were, what happened with
that's
that?
jumping ahead to almost, what was that, like 2008 that we took the first trip to Nigeria?
It was actually 2007.
So
Yeah,
that
before we-
was many years of having the church in the UK. I think we all thought, well, I thought I was going to be there forever. I definitely was very shocked when you guys told me. I think my first words are, wait, so I'm never going to be famous? What do you mean?
She had her own YouTube channel, and she had the most beautiful little accent. Both of you guys had incredible English accents. In fact, my mom and your mom were like, oh my gosh, our grandchildren, we can't even understand our grandchildren because you guys have such thick accents.
Also, whenever you say, hey, you're moving to Africa, what you think of is, oh, the desert safari, lions and tigers and bears like running around. Like, you don't really put into perspective what Africa can really be like too. So yeah. So we took our first trip there in 2006, you said?
Seven.
How did that come about?
Yeah, that was so is your mom's fault. Kind of.
Sorry.
So at that time the church had grown like 20-30% every year for a number of years, and we were in building projects, and I happened to be, from my architecture background, the person that did a lot of the projects. Plus teaching, we had the Bible school going, it was going great. Church 3 services on a Sunday. So I was teaching like 300-400 times a year, all that contracting that we were doing for projects, and I was exhausted. And I was looking forward to resting in August with you guys. In England, as you know, the summer, you have a short school break from like the end of July.
Like 6 weeks.
Yeah, 5 almost. And so a lot of people take extra time, 2-3 weeks with the kids and just spend time with. I was looking forward to that and resting. And your mom says, hey, there's a couple in the church, they're Nigerian. They have a visiting pastor and they want you to meet him from Nigeria. And I'm like, no, I don't want to meet him. He's just going to invite me to Nigeria. I'm going to have to tell him no. And she's like, no, you really should. I'm like, I literally have like a half an hour between what I'm doing in my meetings in the service tonight. I'll meet with him. And so the first thing he says is, come to Nigeria. And I'm like, oh, thank you so much. It's very gracious of you. I need to decline. I'm not in a position to do that. And usually when they ask you to come, they want you to come with your money to do pay for the event and stuff like that, big meetings. And I'm like, we're in building projects. I'm not in a position to fund that. And he's like, fund it? No. He's like, we'll pay for everything. And I'm like, thinking that he's talking about the meeting. And I'm like, oh, that's amazing. That's gracious. Thank you so much. But still, I don't want, I want to be with my family. And he's like, bring the family. And I'm like thinking all the price of the tickets and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, that's a lot of money. He's like, well, we'll cover everything. We'll put you in a nice hotel. You can spend time with your kids and have time at the pool and all that kind of stuff. And then just preach a night. And I'm like, that's the most gracious offer I've ever heard. I'm like, I still said no. And then he says, come and teach on missions. And I'm like, oh, now I got to come, because the Lord had spoken to me a few years before that anytime I ever have an opportunity to go to a place that's a missionary receiving place to teach on missions, I'm supposed to say yes. And I'm like, no, I have to come. And anyway, so we went there. While we were there and you guys were swimming at the pool, there was an African pastor who had lost his father. His father had passed away, and he was hiding away because in that culture, everybody comes to visit you constantly for days and days and days. So if you've lost a loved one, you get, especially if you're well known like he was, you get no rest at all. Mm-hmm. And so he was kind of hiding away, getting some rest with his family there. And I'm like, man, I know that guy's a believer. He was just sat by the pool. His kids were swimming. I know he's a believer. I think I'm supposed to go over and talk to him. And while at the pool, there was something else that the Lord spoke to me in my heart that was important for me personally, for my personal calling. And so anyway, I went over and talked to him. And when I started talking to him, he started telling me the story of the influence and impact that Kenneth Hagin Ministries had had on Nigeria that I had no idea about. And I'm like, I don't even think Pastor and Mrs. Hagin know anything about this. And as he began to unfold that was the spark that began to sit in my heart that maybe we're supposed to do something with the Bible colleges here. But even then, there's so many amazing churches in that country, massive churches that have 50,000 seats and they have multiple services on a Sunday. Churches that have close to 100,000 now, and they have multiple services. I'm like, why would we need to go there and do anything? And the Lord began to speak to us about that he was repositioning us. So this thing about England is a nation from which to reach the nations that happened both in the country and from the country. I had put the interpretation, it was a simultaneous thing, and it had happened simultaneously, both in the country and from the country, because we were reaching multiplied nations in the church, and then also we were doing it from the country as we traveled. But then the Lord said, actually, if you look at it differently, that's a two-phase thing, both in the country and then from the country, phase two. And it was like the Lord saying, I want to separate you into your second phase of your missionary calling, which was to reposition us in Abuja, Nigeria, and focus on the 1040 window, that 10th parallel and 40th parallel. And Abuja is on like the 9th parallel, so it's pretty close to the 1040 window. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, hearing some of the stories, and letting us pull back the curtain a little bit and invite you into our family adventures over these last 30 years. It's because of you that Clifton 40 has been able to do anything that we've done. Thank you so much.